10 years of marriage, and it ended over one sentence. I'm taking the dog. You get the kid. That's what my wife, Marla, said as she zipped up her oversized floral suitcase like she was packing for a weekend spa retreat instead of detonating a decade of shared life. She didn't cry. She didn't look back. She didn't even lower her voice. The zipper hissed closed, final and metallic, like punctuation on a threat she had no intention of explaining. Behind her, her mother Denise stood in the hallway in one of those aggressively pastel power suits she wore like armor. She let out a laugh, low, smug, too satisfied. Well, at least the dog's trained, she said with a hand on her hip, eyes flicking over me like I was dirt she was glad to be rid of. I was still in my flannel pajama pants, barefoot, holding my son Milo's cereal bowl midair like a forgotten offering. The spoon clinked against the ceramic edge as I tightened my grip. I wasn't dressed for war. I wasn't even dressed for mourning. And somehow, that made the whole thing worse. Marla looked at me like I was a mild inconvenience, like I was a parking ticket on her windshield. Not the man who had held her hair back through morning sickness. Not the one who changed every diaper for the first 6 months when she spiraled into postpartum depression. Not the man who built a backyard treehouse for a son she barely remembered to kiss goodnight. Milo was in the next room, the soft scritch-scratch of crayons coming from the living room rug. Drawing superheroes again, probably. He had no idea that his mother had just called him baggage in a custody arrangement she made without a shred of hesitation. I opened my mouth, closed it again. What was there to say? That I couldn't believe it? I could. Somewhere along the line, I'd started seeing the cracks in her kindness, the way she disappeared emotionally before she ever did physically. This moment, was just the concrete version of the silence we'd been living in. She slung a duffel bag over her shoulder and called out, "Pepper, come on, girl." Our golden retriever bolted down the hallway, ears perked, tail wagging. Pepper paused by my leg, just for a heartbeat. She looked up at me, eyes soft, uncertain. "Go on," I whispered, voice too hoarse. "Go." She licked my hand once, then trotted after Marla like she didn't know any better. Or maybe she did. Dogs are loyal until they're told not to be. The door opened. Light from the hallway poured in. Marla stepped outside. Denise followed with her phone already raised, probably texting her sister about how her daughter finally got out. The door closed behind them, just like that. No hug. No goodbye. No, "I'll miss you" to the boy in the next room with the cereal-stained sleeves and a Superman drawing in progress. I walked slowly to the couch and sank down, bowl still in hand, spoon submerged in soggy Cheerios. A tiny part of me thought, maybe she'll turn around. Maybe she'll come back. Maybe this is a nightmare. But the silence that settled into the walls was too real. Milo padded into the room in mismatched socks, crayon tucked behind one ear, drawing clenched in both hands. He looked up, blinking. "Where's Mom?" "She had to go," I said, careful. "She needed some time." He nodded like he understood, but he didn't. How could he? The last thing she'd said to him the night before was, "I love you, kiddo. Sleep tight." Now she was gone, and she took the dog. He held out the drawing to me. It was of a caped hero standing in front of a burning building. "That's you," he said. "I gave you a fire shield." I didn't cry. Not in front of him. Instead, I took the drawing and smiled. "That's perfect, buddy." Later, after he was in bed, still asking if Pepper was coming back, still reaching toward the empty corner where her bed used to be, I sat alone on the floor, back against the dishwasher, knees bent, phone in hand, scrolling through old pictures. The family trip to Myrtle Beach. Milo's 3rd birthday party. Marla laughing with Pepper in the snow. Her eyes had been different back then, softer. Or maybe I had just imagined softness because I needed to see it. 10 years. Gone like a bag zipped shut and a door closing. I thought about the words she left behind. Not "I'm sorry." Not "take care of him." Just, "I'm taking the dog, you get the kid." As if Milo was some unwanted obligation. As if parenting was a barter system and she'd just traded down. It burned. Not because I didn't love my son. I did. Fiercely. But because in that moment, she made it sound like keeping him was punishment. But it wasn't. That night, I tucked Milo in tight, rubbed his back until his breathing slowed. And when I stood up to leave, he grabbed my hand and mumbled, "I'm glad I got you." I knelt beside him and whispered back, "I'm the lucky one." And I meant it. Even if she took the dog, I got the kid, and I wasn't letting go. The silence after she left wasn't just quiet, it was alive. It pressed in on the walls, stretched across the floorboards, and curled itself into the corners of the house like a fog that wouldn't lift. Marla was gone. Pepper too. And the laughter, the barking, the footsteps that used to trail after me in the hallway, all of it went with them. What was left behind wasn't peace. It was absence. Milo didn't ask for details. Not right away. He was only 9, and kids have this strange ability to understand too much and too little all at once. He climbed into my bed that night like it was nothing new, like it wasn't strange that his mother hadn't kissed him goodbye, hadn't even waited to see if he'd noticed the way her side of the closet was empty. He curled into me without a word, his small back pressed against my chest, his fingers clutching the edge of the blanket like it might float away. I didn't move. I barely breathed. I just stayed there, watching the ceiling, wondering how I was going to do it all. The next morning, I made pancakes. It wasn't just breakfast, it was strategy. I needed to keep things familiar. So I cooked them the way he liked, crispy on the edges, soft in the middle, with chocolate chips shaped into little clumsy smiley faces. He smiled when he saw them, but it was thin. His eyes were still puffy, though he hadn't cried. Neither of us had. That was the part that scared me. I packed his lunch and added a sticky note, just like always. Super ad says, "Save the world, but eat your apple first." It earned a chuckle. Barely. But I held on to that sound like it was a rope pulling me up from a deep place. I dropped him off at school, watched him walk in with his backpack dragging just a little heavier than usual. He didn't look back. He always used to look back. When I got home, I stood in the living room for what felt like an hour, just staring at the space where Pepper's water bowl used to sit. The outline was still on the tile. Her leash still hung by the door, forgotten in the rush. I should have taken it down, but I didn't. Not yet. I tried to keep up the routines. Made dinner. Did laundry. Checked his homework. Sat beside him on the couch while he watched cartoons. But there was something in the way he leaned into me now. Like I was an anchor he didn't trust to hold. Like part of him expected I'd disappear next. At night, he clung tighter. He stopped drawing for a while, and that scared me more than anything. Drawing was his outlet, his way of sorting the world into shapes and lines and colors. But the crayons sat untouched on the table for days. I tried not to push. Instead, I became a version of myself I hadn't needed to be before. I learned to braid his hair when it got too long. I figured out how to talk about puberty without sounding like a middle school health film. I sat through YouTube videos about anime so I could ask the right questions. I said yes to too many desserts and let him fall asleep on the couch because it made him feel safe. But even with all of that, I could see it, this slow tightening in him. A dimming, like someone was pulling the light from behind his eyes, inch by inch. One afternoon, I picked him up from school, and he didn't say a word the whole ride home. Not even when I played his favorite song. When we pulled into the driveway, he finally asked, "Do you think Pepper misses me?" The question landed like a punch to the ribs. "Yeah," I said softly. "I think she does." He didn't say anything else, just climbed out and went inside. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat on the edge of the tub and stared at the tiles until my vision blurred. The weight of it all, the loneliness, the fear, the constant pressure to be everything pressed down on my chest so hard I had to remind myself to breathe. I wanted to scream, to call Marla and demand she explain herself. Not for me. For him. For the kid she left behind like a sweater she didn't need anymore. But I didn't call. I couldn't give her that. Not yet. Instead, I started a list. A list of things I could do to help Milo feel whole again. Therapy. Weekend hikes. Drawing time. More books. A pet fish maybe, something alive in the house again. I wrote them down with shaking hands, like if I just made the right plans, I could fix the cracks before they widened. The next morning, I made pancakes again. Milo looked at them, then at me. "Are we always going to have pancakes now?" I hesitated. "Only on the days that end in Y." He snorted into his orange juice, and it was the first real laugh I'd heard since she left. I grabbed it. I held on to it with everything I had. Because deep down, I knew something neither of us could say yet out loud. We both lost something that night. Only one of us was going to fight to get it back. And it sure as hell wasn't her. It was our first court appearance, and already, it felt like a stage play. A bad one. Marla arrived 20 minutes late, flanked by her mother like some reality TV duo entering a reunion episode. They swept into the family court lobby in matching confidence and perfume. Marla with perfect curls and a blazer too crisp for someone who hadn't seen her son in weeks, and Denise with a Tupperware container of banana muffins she handed off to the receptionist like this was a PDA bake sale. "We're just here to make sure everything stays fair," Denise chirped. "Fair?" I sat on the other side of the waiting room, in a wrinkled button-down and tie that hadn't been touched since my last job interview 3 years ago. My lawyer, Jonas Herrera, was beside me flipping through a file thick with timestamped screenshots and email printouts. He didn't say much, just offered a calm nod when Marla finally glanced our way. She looked through me like I wasn't there. I don't mean metaphorically. I mean she literally looked over my shoulder, like eye contact would contaminate her moisturizer. "Nice of her to show up," I muttered. Jonas leaned over. "Don't worry. Family court judges see through performances. Just stick to the facts." I nodded, but my stomach twisted. I hated this. Every part of it. The fact that Milo's future was about to be decided by people in robes and suits who had never heard him laugh or seen him build pillow forts. The fact that the woman who walked out on him was about to argue she deserved equal say in his life. The fact that, despite all she'd done, or hadn't done, she could still win, just by putting on the right face. When we were finally called in, the courtroom looked smaller than I expected. No sweeping ceilings or gavel slams. Just old wood, buzzing fluorescent lights, and a judge who looked like she'd been doing this since typewriters. Marla crossed the room like she owned the air. Her heels tapped confidently as she sat next to her attorney, Penelope Wright, a woman who looked like she did yoga with shark clients. They whispered to each other, glancing at me with bored smirks. The judge didn't waste time. "We're here regarding the custody arrangement between Ms. Marla Harper and Mr. Daniel Harper," she began. "Ms. Harper, you requested to speak first." Marla stood and launched into her monologue. "Your Honor, I just want what's best for Milo. He's such a sensitive child. He needs structure and support. I've created a stable, calm home environment where he can thrive. I have a new job, a new place, and I'm in a better headspace now. I want to be involved. I want to co-parent with Daniel." The words rolled off her tongue like she'd practiced them in front of a mirror. She even dabbed the corner of her eye with a tissue she pulled from her purse, so perfectly timed it might as well have come with background music. I recognized the act. I used to be married to it. Jonas stood slowly, collected. "Your Honor, Mr. Harper has been Milo's primary caretaker since Ms. Harper's departure. During that time, she has made minimal effort to engage in Milo's life. We have documented proof of missed calls, unanswered messages, and no attempt to acknowledge significant events like his birthday. We also have concerns regarding Ms. Harper's communication with both Milo and third parties, which we're prepared to submit into evidence." Marla's jaw twitched. The judge looked unimpressed. "Ms. Harper, have you sent any birthday cards, letters, or gifts to your son in the past 4 months?" Marla blinked. "I've been going through a transitional period, Your Honor, but that's no reflection of my love for him." I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. This wasn't the time for emotion. It was time for proof. Jonas handed the judge a packet. She leafed through it slowly. "Screenshots of text from me to Marla. Milo misses you. Wants to FaceTime. No response. He made a card for you. Wants to send it. No reply. Can you come to a school play? Seen. Never answered." Penelope cleared her throat and spoke for the first time. "Your Honor, we'd argue that Mr. Harper has been intentionally restricting contact, which could skew perception." The judge looked at her over her glasses. "Is there any documentation of attempted contact on your client's end?" Penelope froze. "No, ma'am," Marla said quickly. "But I didn't want to overwhelm him while I was getting settled. I thought giving him space would be healthier." The judge turned to me. "Mr. Harper, what has your son said about his mother's absence?" I paused. This wasn't the moment to win. It was the moment to protect. "He asks about her sometimes," I said slowly. "Wonders if she's okay. He misses the dog. But he hasn't asked to call her. He stopped mentioning her after a while. That's what scares me." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "Children don't need perfect parents. They need present ones." And just like that, the performance began to crack. Marla's smile faltered. Denise, who had been watching smugly from the back, whispered something and stood to leave, maybe to make a call, maybe because she couldn't stand the show falling apart. I looked across the room at the woman I once promised forever. I saw the mask slipping, the tremble behind her perfect posture. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't there to win. I was there for Milo. And this was just the beginning. It started with little questions. Quiet, harmless on the surface, but loaded underneath like landmines wrapped in bubble wrap. Why does Mom say you're always mad? I looked up from the dishwasher, where I was elbow-deep in soap suds, Milo sitting at the kitchen counter with his math book open but barely touched. His voice was soft, uncertain, like he didn't even know if he should ask. What do you mean, Bud? She said you used to yell all the time, he muttered. I'm still on the page. She said that's why she left. I dried my hands slowly, buying time. I didn't yell. I hadn't even raised my voice in this house since the day she walked out. That had been the point, silence instead of chaos. Holding the line instead of breaking it. She said that. I asked. Milo shrugged. She said you were always angry when she tried to help. I pulled a chair out and sat across from him. Do you think I'm angry? He didn't answer. Not right away. No, he said finally. But sometimes you look tired. That got me. Because he was right. I was tired. Tired in ways a nap wouldn't fix. Tired in the bones and the soul. Tired from carrying both of us through a storm I didn't ask for, while pretending like the roof wasn't leaking. I reached across the table and put a hand on his. I'm not angry at you. And I'm not angry all the time. I promise. He nodded, but I saw the seed had been planted. Not by me. Not even by him. But by her. The questions kept coming, each one a chisel to the version of myself he knew. Is it bad if I miss Pepper more than Mom? Did Mom leave because I'm hard to take care of? Do you cry when I'm not here? The last one made me pause mid-lunch packing. What? She said you cry when I'm not around. She said that's messed up. That word. Messed up. Not sad. Not hurt. Not lonely. Messed up. I gripped the kitchen counter until my knuckles went white. Marla wasn't just dripping poison into his ears. She was shaping his world with it. She didn't want custody. She wanted confusion. A child torn enough to keep her innocent, to keep me on the defense, to keep us both under her thumb from afar. I kept it together. Barely. Do you think that's messed up? I asked. Mila looked down. No, but she made it sound like it was. And there it was. The crack in her charm. The gloss she wore in court was already peeling at the edges, and Milo, sweet, observant Milo, was starting to see beneath it. That night, after he fell asleep, I dug through my phone. Not to scroll, to document. Every question, every strange phrase he repeated from her. I started keeping notes. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a record keeper, a guardian, a lighthouse documenting every flicker of the storm. Then came the message. He showed it to me one night, clutching his tablet like it was radioactive. I don't think she meant for me to see this. It was a message from her. Not to him. He wasn't the intended recipient. Maybe it was to her new boyfriend. Maybe to her sister. I didn't care who. What mattered was what it said. He's so clingy. I can't breathe when he's around. It's like being suffocated by my own child. Then another line. Sometimes I wish he'd just live with Daniel full-time. That boy ruins everything. Just like his dad. I couldn't breathe. For a full minute, I just stared at the screen while the walls closed in. Milo's voice broke through the static. Is that true? I turned to him slowly. Not even close, I said. You are the best part of my life. You hear me. He nodded, but his eyes stayed wide. Afraid. Hurt. I pulled him close. Held him so tight, I felt his ribs move with each shallow breath. He didn't cry. Neither did I. We just sat there, tangled in silence and flickering light from the screen. She was unraveling. But this time, it wasn't just from my life. It was from his trust. The next day, I saved the message. I backed it up. Sent it to Jonas with a simple subject line. This changes everything. Because it did. It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was damage. And I wasn't going to let her cause any more of it. Milo had seen the truth. Unfiltered, unguarded. And he brought it to me. Not because he wanted revenge. Because he wanted to understand. And now, so would everyone else. It was almost midnight when I heard the soft padding of Milo's feet across the hardwood. I was on the couch, half asleep, the TV still playing some documentary I'd stopped paying attention to an hour ago. The house was dark except for the dim glow of the living room lamp and the flickering blues from the screen. I figured he wanted water or maybe another hug. Instead, he stood there in his pajama pants, holding his tablet in both hands like it might burn him. His eyes were wide but steady, mouth set in a line too serious for a 9-year-old. Dad, he said quietly, I don't think Mom meant for me to see this. That sentence, it hollowed me out before I even saw what he held. He walked over, climbed up beside me without another word, and handed me the tablet. I wiped the sleep from my eyes and adjusted the screen. My stomach dropped the second I saw her name. It wasn't a message to him. It was from Marla, but it had clearly been sent to someone else, someone whose number wasn't saved. A green bubble. A one-sided glimpse behind a mask she didn't know was slipping. It read, "I'm so tired of Milo being around all the time. I feel like I'm suffocating. I can't even enjoy a day without him clinging to me." Another bubble popped up beneath it. Sent minutes later. "He ruins everything, just like his dad." I didn't move. I didn't blink. That line wasn't just careless. It was cruel. And Milo had seen every word. He was watching me now, trying to read my face, looking for permission to feel whatever he was feeling. "Is that true?" he whispered. I turned to him. He looked smaller in that moment. Not just because he was young, but because words that weren't meant for him, had landed like bricks on his chest. "No," I said, voice firm. "Not even close." His eyes watered, but he didn't cry. He just curled into my side. I wrapped my arms around him, pulled the blanket over us, and held him like that message hadn't just carved something out of him. "I didn't want to ruin anything," he mumbled into my chest. "You didn't," I said. "You never did." He sniffled. "Then why would she say that? How do you answer that? How do you tell your son that sometimes people, especially the ones who should protect you, choose themselves at your expense?" "She's confused," I said carefully. "And she's hurting in ways she doesn't understand. But that's not your fault. And that doesn't make what she said okay." He nodded slowly. I didn't know if he believed me yet, but I had to believe for both of us. After he fell asleep in my arms, I gently slid out from under him and laid him down on the couch. I covered him, then tiptoed to the kitchen, tablet in hand. I sat at the table, staring at the screen, rereading those words again and again. I forwarded the screenshot to my email. Then I saved it to a drive. I printed it out and tucked it into the folder Jonas had labeled custody documentation. But that wasn't enough. I needed him to understand that this wasn't the end of the world, that people can say terrible things, and you can still be okay. I needed him to feel seen, not just by me, but by the people who'd soon be sitting in courtrooms deciding his fate like he was a case file, not a child. The next morning, he didn't mention the message. He sat at the table, poking at his pancakes with his fork, syrup soaking into the edges, but left untouched. His eyes were distant, lost somewhere far away. I sat down next to him. "Hey," I said, "you were brave last night." He blinked. "I was scared." "That's what makes it brave," I told him. "You told me the truth, even when it hurt." He nodded slowly. "I sent it to Jonas," I said carefully. "He's going to help us use it the right way. You did the right thing." "Will I have to read it out loud?" he asked suddenly, voice tight. I paused. "Maybe, but only if you want to. No one can make you." He was quiet for a moment, then looked up at me with something new in his eyes. Not fear. Resolve. "I want to read it," he said. "I want them to know what she said." My heart ached, but I nodded. "Okay." He went back to his pancakes. Ate 3 bites. Then 4. It wasn't much, but it was something. Later that afternoon, while he was watching TV, I stepped outside and called Jonas. He answered on the second ring. "Did you get what I sent?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. "It's damning, especially with Milo as the one who found it." "Will he have to testify?" "Only if we decide it's the strongest move." "But Daniel, this could be a game changer. The judge is going to see her intent, her character." I didn't care about winning. I cared about protecting Milo from the idea that he was unwanted, that he was a burden, that love came with conditions. "She called him clingy," I said bitterly. "She said she couldn't wait until he was someone else's problem." "He's not a problem," Jonas said. "I know," I whispered. "But he needs to hear that every day until he forgets she ever said otherwise." That night, I printed the message again. I showed it to Milo, one last time. "This isn't who you are," I said. "And this doesn't define you." He nodded, then looked up. "Can I keep drawing again?" My throat tightened. "Yeah, bud," I said. "Draw as much as you want." And just like that, he picked up his crayons again. And I knew we were starting to heal. The printed message lay on the kitchen table like a wound made of ink. I had read it so many times the words had practically burned into my memory. That boy ruins everything. Just like his dad. It didn't matter how many times I blinked or stepped away. It was always there, humming with its quiet cruelty. I'd made copies. Backed them up in the cloud. One in the glove compartment. One in the drawer where we kept our batteries and screwdrivers. Another tucked into the file Jonas had labeled custody evidence. And still, the hardest part wasn't keeping track of the message, it was figuring out what to do with it. Jonas called around 8 a.m. that morning. He never wasted time with greetings. "Daniel, we've reviewed the message. I showed it to my associate, and he agrees. It's not just damaging. It's defining. This shifts the case." I stood in the laundry room, the hum of the dryer rattling behind me as I clutched the phone. "So what now?" "Now," he said, "we file a request to update the custody terms. I want to include this message in the motion and recommend that Milo be allowed to speak, if you're willing." My breath hitched. "You want him to testify?" "I wouldn't call it testifying. But yes, if the judge agrees, Milo could share his experience. It could be done in chambers. Informal. No pressure. But if you're not comfortable, I'm not worried about me," I interrupted. "I'm worried about him. He's 9. Kids his age know more than we think," Jonas said. "And he's already been used as a pawn. This could be a way for him to reclaim his voice." I didn't respond right away. The idea of Milo sitting across from a judge, answering questions about his mother, about that message, it made my skin crawl. But Jonas wasn't wrong. Marla had already made him part of her game. He'd seen too much to pretend he didn't understand. Maybe giving him a space to speak would help him heal. "I'll talk to him," I said. "If he wants to do it, we move forward." That night, I waited until we'd finished dinner, tacos, his favorite, and cleaned up. We were sitting on the couch, Milo's legs stretched across my lap, the end credits of some superhero cartoon rolling across the screen. I muted the volume and rubbed his calf gently. "Can I ask you something important?" He looked up from his drawing pad. "Okay. You remember the message from Mom?" He nodded, eyes dimming for a beat. "I talked to Jonas today. He thinks it might help the judge understand things better if you told her what you saw. Just talked about how it made you feel. Only if you want to." He paused. "Like, in court. Not in the big room. In a smaller room, with the judge. Maybe with Jonas there too. No one would make you say anything you didn't want to." He sat up straighter. "Can I bring the message?" I blinked. "You want to read it?" "I think they should hear it from me," he said simply. "Not just from you." I swallowed hard. "You're sure?" He nodded. "She says stuff like that a lot, Dad. This one just slipped through." That sentence pierced straight through me. This one just slipped through. Meaning he'd been collecting them, cataloging pain I hadn't even known about. Carrying it with the quiet resilience only kids can manage, until it cracked. "Okay," I said, brushing his hair back. "Then we do it your way." He handed me the crayon drawing he'd been working on. It was a picture of 2 stick figures holding hands. One was tall, one shorter, both wearing capes. Above it, in his messy but determined handwriting, he'd written, "The truth will fly higher than lies." I held the drawing to my chest. "You're brave, you know that?" He shrugged. "I just want them to know who she really is." And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't before. He didn't want revenge. He wanted freedom. The next morning, I called Jonas. "He's in." "Good," Jonas replied. "I'll file the motion today." I hung up and looked at Milo across the table. He was eating cereal, humming to himself, one foot kicking the leg of his chair like nothing had changed. But everything had. Later that week, we practiced. Not rehearsed, practiced. I didn't want to script him. I just wanted him to feel safe saying what he needed to. Each night before bed, we'd sit on the edge of the couch, and I'd ask gentle questions. What did he want the judge to know? What did he remember? How did he feel when he read that message? He never flinched, never asked to stop. But sometimes he'd pause and say, "Do you think she meant it?" And every time, I gave the same answer. It doesn't matter what she meant. What matters is how it made you feel. That's your truth, and no one gets to take it from you. One night, he asked, "Will I get in trouble for saying it?" I looked him dead in the eyes. Never. When we finished, he gave me a hug and whispered, "Thanks for listening." And I realized, that's what this was about. Not the court, not the custody battle, but him being heard. Him not having to carry her words alone. I tucked him in that night and stood in the doorway long after he'd fallen asleep, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. He didn't look scared anymore. He looked ready. And that, I knew, was the hardest decision I'd ever made, giving him the choice. And letting him take it. It started with flowers at the school gate. Big, obnoxious ones. Bright reds and pinks, with little heart-shaped decorations on plastic sticks jammed into the bouquet like afterthoughts. Marla stood in front of Milo's school with the kind of poise reserved for stage proposals. A sleek black dress, carefully curled hair, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, and a handheld camera aimed directly at her smiling face. "Back to school for my brave little boy," she said into the lens with a sugary lilt. "Always lead with love, even when life gets messy." I watched from across the parking lot, mouth dry. Milo, standing next to me, gripped my hand tighter. "Why's she filming?" he asked quietly. I knelt at his level. "Because sometimes people care more about looking like a good parent than actually being one." He nodded like he understood. I wasn't sure if he fully did, but he understood enough, and that hurt more than anything. I walked him past her. She tried to call out his name, but Milo didn't stop, didn't wave. He just kept walking toward the school doors like the cameras didn't exist. She hesitated, then turned back to her audience. "Some kids just need a little space," she chirped to the phone. She posted that clip an hour later. Jonas sent me the link. Caption: "Trying to reconnect. Little hearts take time." I forwarded it straight to him. "Add this to the file," I texted. The next day, Denise showed up. Not at school. At our door. I opened it to find her standing there with a grocery bag in one hand and her trademark self-satisfaction in the other. "Thought I'd drop off some snacks for my grandson," she said sweetly. "You know, show him someone still cares." I looked at the bag. Crackers, granola bars, gummy vitamins. Each item had a sticky note attached. "Don't let daddy's stress make you sick. Remember who loved you first. You're always welcome at Grandma's." It wasn't a snack delivery. It was psychological warfare. I stepped out onto the porch, shut the door behind me, and stared at her. "You done?" Denise blinked. "Excuse me. You came all this way to guilt trip a 9-year-old. Just want to make sure you got everything out of your system before I report this." "You always were dramatic," she muttered. "Marla just wants to reconnect. She wants to make things right." I folded my arms. She had every chance to make things right. She chose the internet instead. Denise held up her hands like I was the one making a scene. "You're poisoning him against her. That's all this is. He's smart enough to know the difference between being protected and being poisoned. That's what scares you." She stared at me for a long moment, then shoved the bag into my chest. "Let the boy decide," she snapped. "Let him come to us when he realizes you're not the saint you pretend to be." She stormed off. I walked inside, locked the door, and threw the entire bag into the trash. Later that night, Milo found one of the notes. It must have slipped out when I wasn't looking. He brought it to me silently, holding it up like evidence. "She said you're stressed," he murmured. "Are you?" I knelt in front of him. "Yeah, I am. But it's not your fault." He nodded, I still fixed on the note. "Why do they keep doing this?" "Because they're trying to make you feel small enough to need them," I said. "But you're not small, Milo. You're strong, and you get to decide what's true." He hugged me then, fierce and fast, like he needed to make sure I was real. The next morning, I called Jonas again. "They're pushing harder," I said. He sighed on the other end. "Classic manipulation. They're baiting you. I'm not taking it, but I want everything documented." Already on it. We kept moving forward, quietly, purposefully. Every night, Milo and I sat together and talked through what he might say when the time came. I didn't coach him. I didn't feed him lines. I just asked questions. "What do you want the judge to know about your life?" "That it's quiet, safe, that I'm not scared here." "What do you want them to know about your mom?" He paused. "That she makes me feel like a problem." "Do you want to tell them that?" "Yes." He wasn't nervous. Not anymore. It was like, with every word he practiced, a weight was lifted. Not because the burden disappeared, but because he finally got to put it down out loud. One night, as he scribbled on a notepad, I watched his hand move with determination. "Do you want to write something down to bring with you?" He looked up. "Can I?" "Of course." He worked in silence, tongue pressed to his lip in concentration. When he was done, he handed it to me. I read it once. Then again. "I love my mom, but I don't trust her. I don't like how she talks about me. I feel better when I'm with my dad. I feel like I can breathe." I didn't cry, but I came close. "You don't have to say all of this," I told him gently. "I want to," he said. I'm tired of pretending she didn't say what she said. The trap had been triggered. Marla and Denise thought they could control the story with flowers, with cameras, with poison snacks. But the one thing they hadn't accounted for, the thing that unraveled their whole performance, was the voice of the boy they tried to manipulate. And that voice? It was ready. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, but in tone. The metal chairs groaned when you sat down, the lighting buzzed faintly overhead, and everything, The judge's bench, the walls, even the silence, felt like it had been scrubbed clean of feeling. Sterile, like it didn't want to remember all the stories it had already swallowed. Marla sat across from me in a navy blue dress with capped sleeves and just enough pearl around her neck to look motherly. Her hair was curled the same way it had been in that influencer video outside Milo's school, but here, the ringlets looked stiff, forced. Her smile was measured, like someone had told her what kind of expression would work best on a judge. Penelope Wright, her lawyer, whispered furiously in her ear before we began. They were already on edge, and they hadn't even heard what Milo was about to say. He sat next to me on the bench, his red sneakers kicking lightly against the metal leg of the chair. He was holding his notebook, the same one we'd practiced with, the one he'd asked to write in every night before bed. He hadn't let it out of his sight since we left the house that morning. It wasn't just paper. It was his armor. The judge, a stern woman in her early 60s with silver streaks through her tightly pulled bun, looked over her glasses at the two tables in front of her. "We've reviewed the updated custody motion," she began. "I understand the child would like to speak?" Jonas stood, calm, composed. "Yes, Your Honor. With your permission, Milo would like to share a few words directly. He's prepared. He's spoken with me, with his father, and understands what this means." The judge raised a brow. "You're certain, young man?" Milo nodded without looking up. "Yes, ma'am." "Then approach." I felt Milo's hand tighten in mine before he stood. His whole body was smaller than the weight he carried. But when he walked forward, he didn't stumble. He didn't shake. He moved like someone with something important to say, someone who had waited too long to say it. He stood just beneath the judge's bench, cleared his throat, and opened his notebook. "I wrote something," he said. "Can I read it?" "You may," the judge replied, voice gentler now. He looked down, took a breath, and began. "My name is Milo Harper. I'm 9. I love comics, pancakes, and building stuff with my dad. I miss my dog. I used to miss my mom too, but now I don't know if I should." You could feel the room still. Even the buzzing lights seemed to hush. "She used to send me messages," he continued. "At first, I liked it. But then she started saying things that made me feel weird inside. Like she didn't really want me around. She said I was too clingy. That I ruined stuff." He paused and looked up, not at the judge, but at Marla. "She said I ruined everything. Just like my dad." Marla flinched. Penelope leaned forward, whispering frantically again. But Milo didn't break. "I showed my dad. Because I didn't want to keep secrets. I thought maybe I did something wrong. But my dad told me the truth. He said I didn't ruin anything. That I was the best part of his life." He swallowed. I saw his hands tremble, just slightly. Then he tightened his grip on the notebook and kept going. "I don't feel safe with my mom. I don't trust her anymore. I don't want to visit her unless someone's with me. I want to stay with my dad." He closed the notebook. Silence followed, the kind that holds its breath. The judge looked down at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Thank you, Milo," she said softly. "That was very brave. You may return to your seat." Milo turned around, eyes flicking to me, and I could tell he'd been holding that speech inside for a long, long time. I rose from my chair and met him halfway. He tucked the notebook under his arm, and I placed a hand on his back as we walked back together. Marla looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her mouth opened, then closed. No words. Not even her practiced charm could cover this. Denise wasn't in the courtroom today, probably told it wasn't worth the risk of another outburst. Good. One less performance to navigate. The judge took her time. She reviewed the printed screenshots again, the messages Marla had sent that weren't meant for Milo's eyes but found their way to him anyway. She tapped her pen once, twice, before finally turning her gaze to Penelope. "Miss Wright," she said, "do you or your client deny that these messages were sent?" Penelope stood. "Your Honor, we don't deny the messages. But I'd like to clarify that they were taken out of context." "They were sent by your client, discussing her child," the judge interrupted. "This court does not accept that context excuses cruelty, particularly not cruelty directed at a 9-year-old. Penelope sat down. The judge straightened a stack of papers and looked directly at me. "Mr. Harper, thank you for bringing this forward. And to Milo, I want to say again, you were heard. And this court believes you." Then she looked at Marla. "Ms. Harper, effective immediately, the court grants Mr. Harper full legal and physical custody of the minor child, Milo Harper. You will be allowed supervised visitation pending review. Further infractions or violations of conduct may result in suspension of visitation entirely. Marla's face crumpled. Her mouth opened again, this time not for a smirk, but to protest. The judge didn't allow it. This court rules in the best interest of the child, she said, rising. And that child just told us what's best. Gavel down. Case closed. Milo squeezed my hand, and for the first time in months, I felt him exhale. We sat in the quiet after, still in our chairs long after the courtroom had emptied. Jonas was packing up papers, murmuring something to a clerk near the bench, but all I could hear was the echo of Milo's voice. Not the actual words, though I remembered every syllable, but the sound of it. Steady, clear, honest, and louder, somehow, than anything Marla had tried to perform. Milo was beside me, still gripping his notebook even though the pages were closed. He hadn't let go of it once. It wasn't just what he'd said, it was the weight of it. What he'd carried. What he'd released. Across the room, Marla sat frozen. Penelope was trying to get her to stand, to move, but her limbs looked locked. I could see the mask had finally cracked. Her expression wasn't one of rage or sadness. It was confusion, like she still didn't understand how she lost. Like she believed the camera version of herself would be enough. That a curl, a cardigan, and a well-placed tear would outweigh the truth. But the truth had a voice, and that voice was 9 years old. Jonas joined us with a slow nod, resting a hand on my shoulder. She won't challenge this, he said under his breath. Not after today. I looked at Milo, who was watching her too. You did good, I said. You did more than good. He nodded slowly. Is it really over? It's over, I said. She can't take you away now. She can't use messages to hurt you. She can't make you feel like a problem anymore. He blinked, and a tear escaped down his cheek. Not sadness, relief. We walked out together, past the reporters waiting on the courthouse steps. Penelope tried to block them with her bag. Marla didn't say a word. Not to them. Not to us. She just turned her face away from the flash of cameras, suddenly shy in a way she'd never been when her phone was in her hand. In the car, Milo rolled down the window and let the wind hit his face. He didn't say anything for the first few blocks. Then, as we passed a diner with a neon, open 24 hours, sign glowing in the afternoon haze, he spoke. Can we get pancakes? I laughed. Absolutely. We parked and walked into the booth-filled warmth of the place, the scent of syrup and butter thick in the air. Milo slid into the seat like he'd done it 100 times before, shoulders loose, his notebook finally set down on the table between us. He ordered chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream and a side of bacon. I didn't bother to tell him no. Today, there were no rules. No limits. While we waited, he pulled out a pencil and began sketching. I didn't look over his shoulder. I didn't need to. Whatever it was his. And he was safe enough now to return to it. The waitress smiled as she brought our food, complimenting his drawing, and he beamed. The kind of beam that says, I'm okay now. He devoured his plate. I let the sugar rush come and go, let him talk about cartoons and school and a science project he hadn't told me about yet. And when we walked out, full and a little drowsy, I felt the shift. Not just in him, but in me too. For the first time since Marla walked out with the dog and a suitcase, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was walking forward. 2 weeks later, the paperwork came. It was final. Legal. Clear. Full legal and physical custody. Daniel Harper. Visitation for Marla Harper. Supervised only. Review scheduled in 6 months, subject to the child's comfort and development. I set the envelope down and looked across the living room at Milo, who was laying on his stomach, drawing again. This time, the pages were full of colors and characters, his imagination in full bloom. There were superheroes again. And one of them looked like me. Cape, bearded chin, apron on, pancake in hand. The other hero was smaller but had wings, golden, with streaks of blue. What's this? I asked, kneeling beside him. It's you and me, he said. We fight silence. I blinked. Silence. He nodded. Like when no one believes you. Or when people pretend everything's fine, but you feel like it's not. Silence is the bad guy. And we beat it. I wrapped an arm around his shoulder and kissed the top of his head. Yeah, bud. We did. A week later, Marla deactivated her influencer channel. Jonas told me her lawyer dropped her. I didn't dig any deeper. I didn't care if she moved to another state, or opened a yoga studio, or tried to start over. That was her right. But not with Milo. Not with his peace. We started building new routines, Saturday morning breakfasts, Tuesday night movie marathons, bedtime stories where he made up alternate endings. And every once in a while, he'd ask about Pepper. I told him the truth. She's probably being loved by someone else now. But if I ever hear otherwise, we'll figure it out. He nodded. No sadness this time. Just acceptance. He wasn't broken. He wasn't bitter. He was healing. And I was too. I didn't need to win anything else. Because I already had the one thing that mattered most. Him. We drove home from the courthouse with the windows rolled down, the late afternoon breeze tangling through Milo's hair as he held his hand out the window, slicing through air like it was water. There was no music playing. No sound but the hum of the road and the occasional whoosh of cars passing by. And yet, the silence between us wasn't heavy, not like before. It was the kind of silence that feels full, not empty. Peaceful, not tense. Like the world had finally unclenched its fists and let us breathe. I glanced over at him. He wasn't smiling, not exactly, but his eyes were soft, calm. He looked older than he had a month ago, not in a way that scared me, but in a way that reminded me just how much he'd had to carry. You okay? I asked. He nodded. I feel light, he said, like I just dropped a really heavy backpack. Yeah, I said. Me too. We pulled into the diner parking lot without even needing to talk about it. It had become our place, not because it was fancy or special, but because it had been there on the day everything changed. The day he took the stand. The day he stood taller than anyone else in that courtroom, even when his voice shook. We slid into the same booth. Milo picked up a crayon and started scribbling on the kids' menu. But this time, he wasn't hiding behind it. He was just doodling, carefree and quiet. The waitress, the same one from before, walked over with a warm smile. Let me guess, chocolate chip pancakes with extra whipped cream? Milo grinned. And bacon. You got it, champ, she said, and gave me a wink. You look lighter today. I chuckled. We're starting to remember what peace feels like. When the food came, Milo dug in like he hadn't eaten in days, stacking bacon inside the pancakes like a sandwich. I just watched him, marveling at how much he looked like a whole kid again. Not one caught in the middle. Not one tangled in a game he didn't ask to play. Just a boy who liked comics and syrup and telling long stories about imaginary universes with complicated rules. I think I'm gonna make a new comic, he said around a mouthful of pancake. Oh yeah? I asked. What's this one about? A superhero dad and his son. But the dad doesn't fly or anything. He just makes the best pancakes in the world and defeats villains with kindness and sticky notes. I laughed. Sticky notes? He nodded. Like, instead of weapons, he leaves notes that make people feel bad about being mean. Like, you're better than this, or try again tomorrow. That's powerful stuff, I said, raising my coffee. I'd read that. He smiled to himself. Yeah, I think I would too. 2 weeks later, the final court papers arrived. White envelope. Official seal. No drama, no fireworks, just ink on paper confirming what we already knew. I opened it at the kitchen counter while Milo sat at the table, gluing wings onto one of his comic cutouts. The words were simple. Full physical and legal custody awarded to Daniel Harper. Marla didn't appeal. Her lawyer dropped her. Jonas confirmed it by email the same day. She's not fighting it, he wrote. I think she knows she already lost the only thing that mattered. I didn't celebrate. I didn't pour a drink or call anyone. I just stood there, letting the finality sink in. It wasn't a victory, it was a closing door. A soft, certain lock on a chapter that had taken more from us than either of us could name. I turned to Milo. It's official. He looked up. We won. We did, I said. We really did. From that day forward, the changes were quiet. Organic. No big declarations, no sudden transformations, just peace, stitched slowly back into our lives. Milo started sleeping in his own bed again, not because I told him to, but because he wanted to. He started drawing full comic series instead of unfinished sketches. We built a shelf together in the garage to display his favorites. Every Sunday, we went for pancakes. Sometimes he brought a sketchbook. Sometimes we played word games or just talked about his week. But always, there was laughter. Real laughter. The kind that bubbles up without warning, from a place that used to be sore. Marla didn't call. No messages. No videos. No sudden deliveries. I wondered if she watched from the shadows, if she saw his artwork online when I posted it for our small circle of family and friends. If she saw the new drawing he made, a cape-wearing dad holding a spatula, and a winged boy standing beside him, grinning. In every version of the comic, the villain wasn't his mother. It wasn't a person at all. It was silence. And every time, we beat it. One evening, I was doing dishes when Milo came into the kitchen with a serious look on his face. Dad? Yeah, buddy. He held up a drawing. This one's different. I dried my hands and took it. It was the same superhero dad and son, but this time, they were sitting on a bench under a tree. No capes. No villains. Just stillness. What's it about? I asked. He shrugged. I think it's just us. Not fighting. Just sitting. I looked at it for a long time. That's the best one yet, I said. And I meant it. Because peace isn't just pancakes and laughter. It's knowing you don't have to fight anymore. It's knowing you were chosen, not just by the court, not just by the law, but by the person who matters most. And every morning, when Milo woke up and wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes and asking, "Are we doing pancakes today?" I didn't have to think. Absolutely. Because peace tastes like syrup, and sounds like a boy's quiet giggle at the table, and feels like home.